On the show today, Mr. Shannon, a couple of longtime friends and associates.
Yeah.
Dave Hodge and Damien Cox join us, and a variety of topics to discuss. The hockey season so far, the Canadian division, the performance of the Toronto Maple Leafs, both extraordinarily good in Edmonton, and then mediocre at best against Vancouver. And we'll talk about a couple of people that we lost over the last 24, 36 hours. That's coming up when the podcast begins after this message. Well, here you go. It's the podcast for a Friday as we get you set for the weekend. Hope everybody's okay. Yours truly, Bob McCown, along with John Shannon.
Hello, Robert.
In his little box in the corner of the screen.
Can I say something here?
Oh, of course you can, John. I can't stop you.
Look what the cat dragged in. I've always wanted to say that. I know. I've always wanted to say it, though. Look who the cat dragged in.
Dave Hodge makes a return visit to the podcast. We're obviously happy to have him with us. And look at that. Damien Cox makes his premiere appearance here on this, whatever it is.
August podcast.
In March.
This is very, very exciting. You can't imagine how excited I was to get a text from Corey Russell last night. I mean,
well, here's the thing.
I'd seen this podcast going along and all kinds of, outstanding people being, invited. So I figured once you went down the list and got to about, my guess was 75 names that eventually it might get to me. And I don't know if I was
pretty close.
Yeah. Thank you.
Pretty close.
Well, as normally the question should be who canceled.
Damien, judge for yourself if you want to join me as a returnee.
All right, we got a lot to talk about here. I don't even know where we should begin, but let us start with the Toronto Maple Leafs, who 24 hours ago looked like they might go undefeated the rest of the season. Everybody was planning the parade. We've gone through this nonsense before with the Maple Leafs, and then they stubbed their toe against Vancouver, a team they probably should have rolled over. I know that doesn't mean a whole lot. 2 games in 2 nights. I don't know, what was it, John? 4 games in 6 nights or something like that.
Yep.
Well, David, based on what you've seen so far, is it even possible to project what this team is or could be?
Legitimate Stanley Cup contenders, if not favorites. And I speak as someone who doesn't just watch games in the Canadian division. I don't see a team that is as impressive as the Leafs, and I know that points in the standings can't be used because they don't relate one division to the other. But I haven't seen a team as impressive as the Leafs.
Homer,
you've watched. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I'm a little different. I only exclusively watch games in the Canadian division, and I found that kind of a bit of a throwback almost to the original 6 days. We see these teams locking horns all the time, and the last time the Leafs played the Canucks, they got some interesting results. The Canucks are not a bad team. They're just, to me, they're a good team that's playing really inconsistently and often badly. And last night they played well. I mean, Jake Virtanen scores 2 goals. How often is that going to happen? So, I think the Leafs were on probably a little bit of an emotional low after having, that's 3-game series with the Edmonton Oilers was a series everybody was talking about as a benchmark in the season, and probably a little bit of a letdown, but it was a close hockey game. It just wasn't a very interesting one.
Well, I think it speaks to the schedule when you consider that the Maple Leafs had to play a second game in 24 hours and the 4 and 6. I think that's probably a bigger issue. Vancouver was better last night. Thatcher Demko was really good in goal. I fully suspect after a day of rest, the Maple Leafs will be a different team on Saturday night in Vancouver as opposed to last night.
This is a season that more than any other that I can remember, that one should not judge any team off one game or even these 3 and 4 game series. Every team, save the Leafs perhaps, and Tampa Bay, and a couple of others, every team has seen a stretch of games where they have been literally humiliated. And it has cost coaches their jobs, rightly or wrongly. But the humiliation doesn't last. It almost sparks some sort of a comeback from Calgary last night. They'd been embarrassed in Ottawa, and you knew they were going to go home and something was going to happen. And the coach got fired, and the Flames win big. Now Edmonton is humiliated. Vancouver has been humiliated. And some teams have been humiliated all season long and haven't recovered from it. But I don't think that it's right to look at one game or even a short stretch of games and judge a team based solely on that.
To your point, David, the only team that has not been humiliated really over any stretch of time, at least in the Canadian division, is the Toronto Maple Leafs.
That's it.
The Montreal Canadiens went through a stretch of winning, then a stretch of losing, fired their coach. Ottawa's been generally inept most of the year. Edmonton has just gone through their set. So everybody's had this kind of a situation.
Really, the only humiliation the Maple Leafs have had are the two losses to Ottawa. The one early in the season, and then when they had the 5-1 lead. Those are the two bad games that the Maple Leafs can point to and say, oh, that was. And by the way, to David's point, the panic in the streets after they lost the 4-goal lead was, oh, are these the same old Leafs? So that's the amazing thing.
It was only a couple of weeks ago that in Vancouver, there was a lot of talk whether Jim Benning and Travis Green were going to get fired. And they ended up holding their jobs, while in Montreal, Claude Julien lost his job. And then, of course, Jeff Ward in Calgary. Both Julien and Ward get fired after their team won. And if you look, Montreal was, guns a-blazing early in the year, scoring 1 million goals, and everybody thought, wow, the Canadians are back. And now they're really struggling. They've lost 2 out of 3 under the new coaching staff. They fire their goaltending coach in the second intermission of one of their games. And now Calgary, which I don't know about you guys, I don't know what the Flames are. I don't even know what they're supposed to be. And now they're bringing Daryl Sutter back from the off the farm again in Viking, Alberta. Daryl returns. One of the guys I really love in the game, but what an interesting choice for Brad Treliving.
The thing you have to, sorry,
Dave,
Bob.
No, go
the
ahead.
thing you have to watch this season more than any other in the standings are games played. The Canucks, they'll call it a big win last night over the Leafs. They are 4 points out of a playoff spot behind the 4th place Montreal Canadiens, who have 5 games in hand on Vancouver. So that swings everything away from Vancouver's favor, no matter how good they look in beating the Leafs, and into Montreal's favor just based on 5 games. And I suggest that means the Canadians are getting 10 points, but it's a big factor, and it is in every division. Watching the games played, and largely the discrepancy is due to COVID.
One of the inevitabilities of watching any team in any sport is that if you play badly enough for long enough, and sometimes you don't have to play that bad and you don't have to play badly that long, the coach is going to get fired. And we often look at it as a process of pressure from the top down to the general manager, down to the coach, and that sort of creates that inevitability. I'm just intrigued what you two guys specifically think the impact of coaching changes, especially in the middle of the season, really has. And to paraphrase that, I suppose I'm saying, how important is a coach? Damien, to you first.
Well, I mean, I think in hockey, to me, it's one of the sports where it can really matter for a variety of reasons. But I mean, you don't have to look any further than the Toronto Maple Leafs, who changed their coach partway through, I think almost exactly a year ago, or no, it was longer than that, sorry. But they changed their coach last year, and then had some ups and downs, and then failed mightily in the playoffs. Now with that coach, still without a training camp and any exhibition games, seems to be the guy who's got it dialed up with this group. So either you get a short-term jump right away, you win 5 games in a row and everybody says the one guy, or it takes some time for the organization to adjust to the new coach, to find the players that'll fit what the coach is doing. I think that's what we're seeing in Toronto. What they're hoping to do in Calgary or Montreal, again, I'm really not sure. Montreal's clearly not getting the short-term bump. They've lost 2 out of 3. And Calgary's a team that's not good offensively, not good defensively, and they're bringing back a non-analytics guy in Daryl Sutter, but a guy who's had an amazing impact on teams short-term before. So it's either a short-term or it takes you a year and a half before you know whether you've got the right guy.
Dave?
Sometimes you have to fire the coach, and the Buffalo Sabres haven't.
Oh.
Sometimes it looks as though you have to fire the coach, and the Columbus Blue Jackets haven't, and they have won a couple of games in a row, and John Tortorella is going to lead them out of the wilderness again, or so the Blue Jackets believe. You can change coaches and win the Stanley Cup. It's happened. And you can change coaches and nothing happens. And that's usually that's usually the bet, that the team is going to do what it's going to do regardless of whether it changes the coach or not. But there are some times when it has to be done. I don't think anybody really questioned the need for the Leafs to make a change last year. And I will say this about the Leafs, since we're talking a lot about them, that in watching the first of those games in Edmonton, the Leafs winning 4-0 and dominating completely, I said to myself, try to find something about this lineup and this team and the way it's playing that would suggest a bad move by the general manager. And I looked at the guy in goal and the people on defense and Spezza up front, and thought of Thornton and Simmons, and looked at Engvalls and Mikheyev. And this is a team that has been put together very well and is now being coached very well.
The interesting thing about the fired coaches is there's no question in my mind that this is as much an ownership decision as it is a management decision, simply because when you look at the amount of money these teams aren't generating right now, when you realize that you're going to have to pay the fired coach, like Claude Julien's going to get $5 billion next year, with or without people in the building. Jeff Ward was a different story, but the relationship in Calgary between ownership, Murray Edwards, and Daryl Sutter was very good. And the fact that this team would make a change with revenues down as low it is. I actually thought we'd go through the season without any fired coaches because no owner wants to lose money. I truly believe that's why Francesco Aquilini gave the endorsement to Jim Benning, Damien, because I don't think he wants to pay another penny to anyone. Well, he has to hire another general manager. So to me, this was ownership saying, we better right the ship, Brad. We better right the ship, Mark. And we have some issues that we have to fix, and we're prepared to bite the bullet on the extra money on the contracts. And that to me, I don't think there's any coincidence either that the 2 fired coaches are in the Canadian division.
This would be the opposite approach to broadcast networks, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, exactly. No. Oh, don't get Bob going on that. Don't get.
Well, we all have a foot in that hole, don't we?
Yeah. So, but just to fit, one more thing, because Dave said he thinks the Maple Leafs are the best team. I've talked to enough people south of the border to say that there's a lot of people looking north and saying, well, it's a different style of hockey. They're not as physical. Every night's a lot tougher in the East or a lot tougher in the West. And how do you measure? And that'll be the real challenge when we get to we won't see an American team play a Canadian team until the 3rd round of the playoffs. So we know that there's going to be at least one Canadian team in the semifinals. So from that
Well,
perspective,
there won't be at least, there'll be exactly one.
well, no, I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to be nice. So
the funny thing about the three divisions south of the border is the top teams are just beating the crap out of the lower teams in those divisions, and Toronto's lost twice to Ottawa. So you figure it out.
Well, let me step back to the coaching thing just for a second here. We all watch every sport. I know how to evaluate a manager in baseball, at least in my mind, how he uses his pitching rotation, his lineup, those kinds of things. I know what I think is right and whether he agrees or whether I agree with him. Football, I think it goes without saying, it's X's and O's, it's every play. Hockey is a lot more vague for me. I'm interested in you guys educating me on exactly what it is that if you were a general manager, what asset do you want your coach to bring when you make that coaching change? What exactly is he doing? Is this technical stuff, or is this mostly about relationships?
Yes, it's both.
Yes.
Well, you know what? Let me jump in and say, I think two things. One, you either want the guy to bring organization because your team's all over the place, or you want him to bring something to kick the butt of your best players and get your best players going. And I think that's what we're going to see in Calgary. You got to get Gaudreau and Monahan and those guys going. And I think in Toronto, it was an organizational thing between when they made a change between they wanted a GM and a coach to be on the same page. So, to me, all 31 teams in the league, and I assume the 32nd team, the Seattle Kraken, will do the same, all play kind of the same style of hockey. We've seen a development of this homogenous style of NHL hockey in the last few years. There's differences, but they all play about the same style. For me, a coach has got to be the guy who gets his guys revved up to go and all on the same page. And that's when that's not the case, that's when they make a change.
I want a coach that nobody knows and or nobody thinks would ever become a good coach. Jeremy Colleton, like who knows him? People in Chicago don't know him, and he coaches the Blackhawks. Dean Evison coaches the Minnesota Wild, and you could stump a lot of hockey fans with that name. Bruce Cassidy is somebody that was never mentioned in either of my years as a good coach or somebody who would become a coach in the NHL. And I think he's a very good coach in Boston. I think sometimes the fame and the notoriety that follows these guys can be a detriment. And give me a no-name coach. How does that feel?
Well, I don't know that I have the answer to the question, and which is exactly why I asked.
So to follow up on in Calgary, the vision I had last night when we got the news about Daryl was, and all you guys are wrestling fans, I know you love wrestling, was the lights go down, the spotlight comes out, and here comes the Undertaker, and here comes Daryl, because I'll tell you what, the reality check that team is going to have with Daryl Sutter, and Daryl now, by reputation alone, doesn't have to say anything. He can walk into the room, and it's similar to what we saw when Lou Lamoriello showed up in Toronto as the manager. Daryl will walk in the room, and the players are going to be wide-eyed. They are going to be responsive. They are not going to be out of line, and Daryl won't have said a word yet. And I think that's the one thing that they're trying to do in Calgary, is to make sure that, I don't want to call it a culture change, I don't want to call it a country club, but I do think that what they're trying to do is create accountability, and Daryl Sutter will do that in Calgary.
So the one thing about Daryl Sutter, it's his second go round in Calgary, and I'd be interested what you guys think about second go rounds in sports. I mean, it's the Billy Martin syndrome, right? This used to work. The Leafs bring back or win 4 Stanley Cups with Punch Imlach in the 60s. They bring him back in the late 70s. It's a complete disaster. Claude Julien got 2 cracks in Montreal. Wasn't very successful the second time at all. Daryl Sutter, though, is kind of different because when he left, he was there. He was the name of the coach in 2002. He left in 2010. And it was, the feeling was he'd run out of gas. They were tired of him, and all that sort of stuff. And they'd never won. They were the team that couldn't win. Now, maybe they should have on the Martin Gelinas goal, but that's another argument. But they'd never won. Now he comes back to town with 2 Stanley Cup rings. He's a guy who can win, who has proven he can win, and not so long ago. So the second act of coaches is always a fascinating one.
His act won't change. None of his players will receive a Hallmark card from Daryl Sutter.
No.
And they won't get too many pats on the back. He'll hit them on the back.
No, you can't do that anymore, Dave.
Yeah, and Daryl Sutter needs to learn that.
Yeah.
Well, he's got a team that he's, is there a single player in Calgary that was there when Sutter got fired? I don't think so.
No. Michael, he actually drafted Michael Backlund. He was the manager when they drafted Michael Backlund. So
that's as close as you can come. So it might as well be a new guy. It might as well be a guy they didn't know. I mean, the fact that he was there so many years ago is almost inconsequential. The trade deadline will be intriguing this year, and I assume the 2 big sports networks will spend colossal amounts of money, since they've saved so much money in firing all of us. That they'll continue to do this nonsense on trade deadline day. Will there be a trade to discuss?
Well, John,
not 20, not 30 insignificant 4th line guys. Will there be even one? David.
John's going to explain the COVID complications regarding trades.
Well, I think everybody gets it. If you trade from Canada to the U.S. or sometimes from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, guys are going to sit for as long as 2 weeks, and our general manager is going to be willing to live with that.
And to that point, you wonder if it puts a bit more or gives more possibilities that the trades that do happen might happen between Canadian teams.
Well, that's just it.
Yeah, I mean, because then you don't have to sit the guy down for 2 weeks, and who knows what happens after that. So the Leafs get Alex Galchenyuk from Ottawa. He doesn't have to go through it. Now, they put him in the minor leagues, but they got him playing right away. Ottawa gets Ryan Dzingel from one of the U.S. teams, and he just started playing now. So if it's going to be close for the playoffs, and I think we all imagine it's going to be, the Leafs are going to finish first, and then it's going to be second, third, fourth, and it's going to be really close. You missing a guy for 2 weeks, like Winnipeg had to do without Patrick for 2 weeks before Dubois got playing. Around April, I don't think you're going to be able to do that and feel very confident that your team's going to be able to make playoffs. Now, maybe there's one team that will be able to do that.
I remember trade deadline broadcasts that felt like 2-week quarantines.
Yes, everyone. I think everyone does. I think you're being too subtle there, Hodge.
But I will note that this will probably be the first trade deadline that we've all done in a while that we could actually golf on. So we could be on the golf course while they're working. April the 12th, by the way, is the date. April the 12th. So the other, I think, Damien, you talked about the top of divisions in the U.S. beating the bottoms of the divisions. I think we got a real sense of who's going to be a trader now. I think we know 7 or 8 teams right now, including the Senators. And I think the question becomes, is Vancouver in that group? And Calgary's trying not to be in that group. Are there teams that are prepared to make moves for the future? And I mean, Ryan Dzingel may have the shortest career in Ottawa the second time around.
Well, I think
because I fully expect that he will move on the 12th of April again.
You mentioned Calgary. I think they're the team that likeliest to make a move. Sam Bennett seems likely to go. Now, whether he'll get a new life under Daryl Sittler, I don't know.
Sutter,
Daryl
Sutter.
Yeah. So I think that we're going to see some teams move quick. Everything seems to be happening Montreal fired their coach after 17 games because it's only a 56 game season. And they were 4 games over 500, depending on how you count 500. The Calgary Flames are 11-11-2. 24 games, they fire their coach. Everything's happening faster in a 56 game season.
I heard, I want to take a break, but I heard this conversation on one of the TV networks. I think it was TSN. What move are the Toronto Maple Leafs most likely to make? David, you talked earlier, and it's hard to argue that they look about as good as you can look. Is there a need for the Toronto Maple Leafs? And if so, what the hell's that?
I'm shocked that question was asked on TSN.
It was.
That's a whole other show, isn't it?
It was on a
show if you
Winnipeg.
want.
The problem was, guys, it was on a Winnipeg Montreal broadcast. So that was
and did it require a top 5 answers?
It probably did, but as soon as I heard it, I went, really? Click and change the channel.
or a quiz.
You know what, I haven't given that question that much thought, but I would think, sure, the Leafs are in a position where they could win the Stanley Cup. I think they believe that. I think they believe that from the start of this season, or from the end of last season. I think the addition of Thornton and Simmons, those are moves that teams that think they're going to go for it make. And those aren't moves that a team with Matthews, Marner, Riley, all, maturing at the same time would consider. So, yeah, I think the Leafs are a team that has made moves with the Stanley Cup in mind, and it's quite possible there's another one coming. I don't know what it would be.
Damien?
The only thing I was going to say about Toronto is, I hear, in fact, on TSN that they're everybody seems to be a consensus, a top 6 forward. I don't see that. I think they need Wayne Simmons back and playing the way he was playing. They've got Nick Robertson and Alex Galchenyuk, maybe as guys who can help in the minors. I think they need a defenseman. Everybody needs a defenseman. Are you comfortable with Travis Dermott, in a tough playoff series? And maybe you are, maybe not. But you're going to need more than 6 guys. And they think with Mikko Lehtinen, they've got a 7th guy. But you get into 8th, 9th guys in the playoffs. So I think the Leafs need another defenseman.
I hate to say it, but Damien's right.
Well, the intriguing thing, too, is during the offseason, there was a debate about the validity of Anderson coming back, or should he be disposed of because he was inferior. And there was absolutely no confidence that anybody else that the Leafs had as a goaltender in the organization was going to be a viable replacement. Now you got all 3 guys are playing great. So
the dilemma, Bob, is when you look at the goaltenders that are going to be free agents this summer, you better go sign Fred Anderson. You better sign him. He might be the best free agent goalie out there this summer. So that's going to be the dilemma.
What you're saying?
No, I think Jack Campbell's a quality backup goaltender. I think Freddie Anderson's a starter.
They came close to doing something that has never been done, surely, and will surely never be done again because they didn't quite do it. But no team, and the schedule has something to do with this, no team has won 3 consecutive games by shutout using 3 different goalies, facing the same team, beating the same opponent. You were rooting for an Anderson shutout, so you could say this is something that goes into the NHL history books.
Let's take a quick break. We'll come back with more. Dave Hodge, Damien Cox with us on the podcast today. Back after this. With David Hodge, Damien Cox, Bob McCown, John Shannon. Sadly, we are at a point in our lives where, with increasing regularity, it seems, we are losing friends. And that was the case with at least a couple in the last, 24, 36 hours. Walter Gretzky, who needs no explanation, introduction, passed away, I believe, at the age of 82. John, is that right?
82.
And there have been many, many tributes to him. I spent, like, I guess like everybody, if you're in the business of sports, it's almost inevitable that you're going to run into Walter at some point in your life, and that's what happened to me. I can't say I was a friend. I can't say I knew him well. He was on the show on a couple of occasions. I saw him walk into the studio on a couple of other occasions and said hello, but that was really the extent of it. I'm wondering if any of you guys had a deep, extensive relationship with him and could share maybe some of the moments that you spent. David?
Well, I'm one of, I assume, many who spent time in the basement of the Gretzky home in Brantford with an extended interview with Wally, as I came to call him. I asked him once, "Who's allowed to call you Wally?" And he said, "My friends." And so that I figured that included anybody, and I was happy to be included in that group. The memorabilia in the basement was impressive. It wasn't, it wasn't anything to rival a Hockey Hall of Fame, but it was Gretzky memorabilia.
Mm.
And I remember vividly Walter putting his hand on my shoulder and saying, "There are years that you can't ask me about." And I guess I should have been prepared, but I said, "Oh, what and why?" And he said, "My memory is wiped from some of Wayne's greatest accomplishments and best seasons." And I said, "Thank you very much." And later, as an aside, Wayne, who watched it and said he enjoyed it, said, "I should have told you that my dad had lost his memory." Following that, every time I saw Walter Gretzky, his memory was amazing. It was good job a month ago on that. I like what you said about Wayne this occasion. I watched the interview with Wayne and I really thought it was good. And those two things have sort of been bouncing around in my head. And the only other thing I would say about the trip to the basement in Brantford was when I heard that $500,000 of that memorabilia had been stolen. My stomach felt sick, and I continue to try to follow that story and hope there is justice done.
Damien, you spend much time with Walter?
Met him a couple of times. Usually, he was in the stands, and very briefly. I knew Walter, though, like a lot of people in the game, through Wayne. And most recently, when I was working on a book that came out a couple of years ago on the '93 series between the Kings and the Leafs, available at fine bookstores near you. Is that allowed?
Thank you.
Talk to Wayne about the '93 series, Game 7. He gets the hat trick, and there's an incredible moment in that series. Walter, I wasn't privileged enough to call him Wally. Walter had was recovering from a stroke, and the family was very concerned about the pace of his recovery and how he was. But he made it to Game 7 and was sitting on the glass across from the Kings bench at Maple Leaf Gardens. And there's an unbelievable moment that they actually caught on television. And that was after, I think, Wayne had scored his third goal, sitting on the bench, sort of leaning with it, and teammates. And he looks across the rink and he sees his father and he just sort of nods like that. And you knew that it was important to him because his father recognized the moment and recognized what was going on with his son, and that it was an important moment for his son. And when Wayne over a long distance telephone call told me that story, and then I went back and watched the video, what a connection between father and son, the one we all would all like to have had with our fathers, and that we'd like to have with our kids, right, with our boys or girls. And so again, that's how I knew Walter, was was through Wayne.
John?
I think the amazing thing is that there isn't one Canadian hockey fan that doesn't think they have a Walter Gretzky story. That's how many people he touched. I was fortunate enough to do a few golf tournaments with Walter, whether it was for the CNIB or for the Heart and Stroke Foundation. And this guy, if there were 160 people in the room, he did 160 individual little discussions with people and took pictures and spoke to everybody. He was truly amazing. And this is after the stroke, Damien. That's how amazing he was. I was really fortunate over, I think, 3 different levels of my time, going to Edmonton as many times as I did in the 80s. And every time Walter came to town, there was Walter Gretzky and Walter and Wayne. And Walter was one of those classic Canadian hockey fathers that absolutely loved Hockey Night in Canada. So every time I saw him in those days, and I was wearing my baby blue blazer, Walter would come over and say hello, and would shake my hand and say, how are things going? And knew my name, which meant more to me than I think he would ever realize. Then fast forward to my time at running Hockey Night and Wayne's retirement night in New York City at Madison Square Garden, and how open the family was to all of us enjoying that final night with Wayne at the Garden against the Penguins. And then finally, the last experience was, again, I was close enough to him because of my connection with the Olympics and Wayne's involvement in the Olympics, that they gave Walter, Hockey Canada gave Walter a special jacket after they had won the gold medal in 2002. And Walter wore it everywhere. Walter was so proud of not just his son, but proud of Canadian hockey, and that Canadian hockey was back. So those days at Air Canada Centre, that it was known then, you'd see Walter wearing his Hockey Canada 50 years of gold medal champions around. And just finally, as a guy who was around that arena a lot, I was amazed at every time they shot Walter sitting in his seat, the organic standing ovation for Walter Gretzky. I think I saw it 5 or 6 times.
Yeah.
And it was hockey fans saluting Canada's hockey dad. And that, to me, spoke volumes of what we thought of Wayne, Phyllis, who was a great lady, and the whole family, and particularly Walter, of what he meant to Canadians. It was really, really touching every time.
Well said by all. We lost another familiar face and voice and a friend. On Thursday night, Chris Schultz passed away, I'm told, of a heart attack at age 61. Chris, unless I'm wrong, actually got his start on primetime sports as a broadcaster. And we kind of popped in now and then and did a couple of a bunch of bits and things, wound up going to TSN, became a big star over there doing football. And I know, David, you spent a fair bit of time with Chris.
Every Sunday morning, as I've said, I hate to repeat tweets, but the first thing that comes to your mind these days when we get this kind of news is what goes out on Twitter, and we've had too much of this kind of news lately. But we would leave the set of TSN, the reporters, Steve and Bruce and Michael, and the first person we would see would be Chris, preparing for his CFL gig on a Sunday afternoon. But why he was there that early, we wondered. And one time we asked, and he said, "Oh, I always get here this early so I can watch you guys. And I really like that segment about this and that. And what do you think about this?" And we called him our largest fan. And so, sometimes it bothers me, these monikers that we attach to people. But a perfect one was Gentle Giant for Chris Schultz. Happy-go-lucky, and always enthusiastic, though life gave him his problems from time to time. But he was always a joy to be around, and for us to get direct approval from a fan moments after we left the set meant we liked that guy a whole lot.
Damien, did you know Chris?
Yeah. Oh yeah, well, Chris was from Burlington. I'm from Hamilton, and I used to run into him at a variety of things, whether it was at CFL games or in the studios, the TSN studios. You wouldn't think that Chris Schultz and Walter Gretzky had anything in common, but boy, they sure did, and that was incredible passion for the game they loved. Chris Schultz and the way he would talk about football. You would think it was like he was talking about his favorite movie over and over and over. He loved the contact. He loved the schemes and all that sort of stuff. He had a great camaraderie on air. I think Matt Dunnigan, Rod Smith, those guys, they put on a great show. And he was a big man who liked being a big man. My hand still hurts from the times he would shake your hand. I mean, your hand would just disappear and then sort of crumple. But he took a bit of pleasure out of that he could do that. And I think I agree with Dave. I mean, always laughing and always so passionate about football and really passionate about the Canadian Football League. So anybody, can we all be as passionate about our work and our lives as Chris Schultz was about the game of football?
Before John weighs in on the CFL part of Chris Schultz, we ought to remember that once upon a time, you couldn't mention his name without having somebody say, he used to play for the Dallas Cowboys.
Dallas Cowboys. Yeah.
That's right.
And wow, really? Yes, he played for the Dallas Cowboys. And now we've come to the point where, and Damien, I'll give the Lou Marsh Award a plug here. We have another offensive lineman from Canada, Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, who was a co-winner of the Lou Marsh Award, playing on the offensive line, not this season. That's a whole other story, for the Kansas City Chiefs. And when I voted for Monsieur Duvernay-Tardif to win this year's Lou Marsh Award, I thought of Chris Schultz, another lineman from Canada in the NFL.
Yeah, well, I was going to mention the Cowboys, but it's at 6'7". Let's remember this guy was, as a football player, was a true anchor to an offensive line for the Argonauts when the Argonauts were really good. I don't know if anybody remembers when the Argonauts are really good. They were very good. They were a very good football team. My first memory of sitting with Chris and talking to him, I had been around the CFL a few years, but Chris was injured and I got invited to sit. And this is kind of, there is a bit of irony in this, or coincidence, depending on whether Damien will correct me. It was Bruce and Wayne and John Candy owned the football team. And Chris was injured, and we got invited to sit in the owner's box. And Chris was with us, and he sat and watched every play of the Argonaut game and detailed everything. His passion for football was remarkable. And from that point on, Chris and I were friends. And while I didn't work alongside him, there was always an opportunity to say hello. There was always an opportunity to talk. And he truly was a gentle giant in the way he approached life and approached the game. And in the last few years, as I understand, his life had fallen properly into place, and he was happy. And it's just it's tragic when events like this happen to good people. So it's a sad day that way.
I hate to make this conversation sadder, but just in terms of knowing what we'd be talking about, we're in the first few days of the third month of this year of 2021. And we have also lost Frank Orr,
Right.
Dick Bradbeer, a guy we all knew, Tony Darchie, who worked with us at, those of us who did work at TSN. And beyond that, probably the greatest surely the greatest actor Canada ever produced. Christopher Plummer, from the world of sports, Hank Aaron, Leon Spinks, Tommy Lasorda, from hockey, Irving Grunman, from broadcasting, Larry King, from acting, Cicely Tyson and Florence Leachman and Hal Holbrook, from music, Chick Corea, Mary Wilson, the founder of the Supremes, Captain Sir Thomas Moore, who amazed everybody, nearly 100 years old and raising $45 million for COVID relief. And I'll really age myself when I talk about the death of Joe Altobelli, who played for the Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team and also the Montreal Royals in the old International League, and went on to a major league career. Sorry for making a list of people who we have lost already in 2021, but it makes you shake your head and it makes you say, no more, give us a break.
Let's all do our best to stay off Dave's list. We don't want to be on that list.
You know, the interesting thing about that is that we're getting old, but we're also talking about people that we feel a lot of those people you mentioned, Dave, and everybody around them, is that we think we knew them because of the way the world communicates now, whether it be television, whether it be movies. I mean, so, you know, when Henry Aaron passed away, we all thought we knew Henry Aaron a little bit. We all remember where we were when he hit 715, you know, and in many ways, Walter was like that, because we all think we knew Walter because we saw Walter, and Wayne talked about his dad so much. And that really, in many ways, that's the magic of the business that we are all in communication and in broadcasting, that people feel closer to all these people.
I remember where I was when Hank Aaron hit 715. I was in my crib and I was pointing at the TV, going "Goo Goo Gaga," and I don't know about the rest of you. And let me
I don't think they would ever call the Don jail a crib, but that's okay.
Now. I one more thing on Chris Schultz, and it's not meant to be disrespectful in any way, shape, or form, but I'm intrigued by whether you guys recognize the same thing in him. Chris Schultz used the word football as an adjective more than anybody I ever knew. A guy wasn't a player. He was a football player, a football coach, a football this, he would throw the word football in 15 times in one sentence. And I remember, I always teased him about it, and but I loved the fact that he did it, and it reflected exactly what you guys were talking about. A guy who absolutely loved his sport, whether it was NFL or CFL, and gave you 100% in the studio as much as he gave you 100% on the field.
You know who else does that, Bob?
There's a few.
Just about every football player who played football and then went on to broadcast football and loved football.
I know, but Schultz was the first guy that I actually sat in the same studio with and heard him rhyme this off, and I just couldn't let it pass. Guys, we've kept you as long as we dare. We thank you both very much for joining us. David, your return appearance was august as usual. And Cox, who knows? At some point, we're going to get to 150. And, you know, the 75 will flip over and you'll get another invitation. We hope you'll accept it.
Hey, don't.
Month of August.
Don't promise what you don't know, Bob, please.
And don't assume that if you're back, I'll be on that show, Damien. You know, we all have things to do.
On that friendly note.
Stay off Dave's note. Stay off Dave's list.
On that friendly note, we'll bid you a fond adieu. Have a nice weekend. We'll catch you on Monday. Goodbye, everybody.